My name is Timothy Barrett, and I am a Monterey City Council member. I'm the appointed Vice Mayor of the City of Monterey, as well as a Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey board member. We're here today to announce the launch of the Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey, but first I'd like to acknowledge some of the people who are standing here with us. Or sitting, as the case may be. So we have Superintendent of Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, P.K. Diffenbach. We have Gathering for Women Business Manager and Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey Board Member, Amy Stalker. Monterey City Manager, Hans Uslar. Deacon of Monterey Diocese, Warren Hoy. Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, David Foster. New Monterey Neighborhood Association Board Member, Sharon Dwight. Chair, Monterey Commercial Property Owners Association, John Tilley. Acting Program Manager, Monterey County Department of Social Services, Allison Yant. Vice President, Community Investments for United Way, Josh Madfus. Executive Director, Central Coast Center for Independent Living, Elsa Quezada. Director, Golden Connections, Doris Beckman. President, Veterans for Peace, Chapter 46, Phil Butler. And Glorietta Rowland, County of Monterey Department of Social Services. And Karen O'Neill, Community Advocate for Affordable Housing, as well as former U.S. Congressman Sam Farr. So, in 1872, an ocean liner named SS Frisia was launched in Greenock, Scotland. On the day the SS Frisia was launched, there were no passengers aboard. Its decks were empty. The galley had no diners, and the holds had no cargo. The hallways and the sleeping cabins were silent, and there was no laughter aboard. Though the SS Frisia was launched as an empty vessel with nary a soul aboard, between 1872 and 1885, that ship would come to carry the hopes and the dreams of nearly 47,000 people seeking new homes and healthful, productive lives. As it was with the launch of the Frisia, so too it is with the launch of the Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey. This is the commencement of a journey, a voyage. If our community is serious about providing workforce affordable housing, this fund will grow and enable the hopes and the dreams of the people of our community to have stable workforce affordable housing leading toward healthful outcomes and productive lives. Here's some background. There's no doubt, of course, it's obvious, the city of Monterey is a beautiful, wonderful place to live and to visit, and the city offers a very high standard and quality of life for its residents and visitors and a full range of services. Nevertheless, it's also true that 68% of the city residents are renters as opposed to homeowners. And there are signs in the community of simmering discontent relating to the tight housing market and the shortage of workforce affordable housing. So here's some statistics. The city has a population of 28,000 people living in 18,000 households. Approximately 20% of our residents are 65 years of age or older, which is a very good thing. However, the population of those under the age of 21 is decreasing. Though the city of Monterey boasts the highest concentrations of college-educated residents in the region, according to the Real Cost Measure report published by the United Way in 2005, 1 in 2 Peninsula residents is challenged to afford the cost of housing, and nearly 1 in 3 is living at or below poverty level when adjusted for the cost of living. Our community's housing challenges most assuredly contribute to the shrinkage of the under-age 21 demographic and the widening gap between the youthful demographic and the 20% of our residents who are over the age of 65. Apart from indicating that the city of Monterey is a wonderful place to live and to retire, which it is, this statistic seems to indicate that our community is losing the ability to regenerate itself in terms of working families with children. So, something about jobs in our community. In the city of Monterey, there are approximately 2 jobs for each household, but less than 1 in 5 of these jobs is filled by a city resident. 80% of the jobs are performed by workers who commute to the city for work. The need to import 80% of our workforce is exacerbated by the fact that many jobs within the city provide wages that are at odds with the city's high costs of housing. Because we import 80% of our workforce, we have increased traffic congestion, stress on our transportation infrastructure, and greater amounts of CO2 emissions than would otherwise be the case. A little about housing. The city of Monterey has identified mixed-use infill development as a way to meet some of the city's workforce housing needs. Also, the city has 20% inclusionary housing ordinance and offers density bonuses to encourage workforce affordable housing development. However, there is tension between the cost of housing development and the rate of return for workforce affordable housing. The Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey seeks to help relieve this tension between unit cost of production and the rate of return of construction of new affordable housing. Additionally, the fund seeks to work with distressed property owners to maintain their homes as affordable housing units. About the Neighborhood Housing Fund, which is NHFM for short. No one approach addresses the affordable housing challenges in our region alone. Rather, a multidimensional approach that addresses multiple facets of housing challenges with various approaches is needed. Therefore, the overall goals of the affordable housing efforts are many and diverse. However, the Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey is one approach that seeks to address a subset of goals. Those goals include maintaining the integrity of our community, fostering healthy, functional, socioeconomically diverse, multi-generational neighborhoods, co-locating workforce with existing jobs, and reducing commute traffic, carbon emissions, and congestion on local roadways. A little about the NHFM approach. NHFM is neighborhood-focused, thereby promoting affordable housing that is the right kind of housing for a given neighborhood, sensitive to residents in the community. NHFM intends to support legitimate projects that meet municipal inclusionary housing goals, thereby leveraging density bonuses and gaining additional units. NHFM plans to work with distressed property owners to maintain their homes as affordable housing. And finally, NHFM will spur collaboration between healthcare providers, employers, and housing developers to bring more workforce affordable housing and improved health outcomes for our community. That concludes my statement. And now I'd like to introduce someone who has served our community as a public servant for many years and who has a continuing interest in the welfare and the stability of our community and our region, former Congressman Sam Farr.
Thank you very much, Timothy, and I'm here to support visionary elected officials who really do want to solve problems. I think one of the greatest problems this beautiful area has is that we've forgotten who built our communities and who they built them for. Growing up here on the Monterey Peninsula, I grew up in Carmel. Every store and every worker in Carmel lived there. Every public employee lived there. It was a residence town. Same with Monterey. If you had a job and you lived in Carmel and you got a job in Monterey, you'd move to Monterey. The idea of commute was not in the vocabulary. And we have lost that. And why I'm here today is that we need to recapture that. And what a better way to recapture it than in the spot where the politics of America and the politics of the Western United States, and particularly California, were born right here. This was, and if you go in and read the debate of that Constitution, some of those issues are as relevant today as they were in 1849. So we have to think outside the box. And the responsibility in law for housing affordability, whether it's workforce or low income, whatever you want to call it, or limited income, elderly on fixed income, all of those responsibilities in law land with the people who give the permits for building and zoning. And that are local communities. And I think somewhere along the way, we have lost the teaching and the implementation of that responsibility. And so when Timothy told me about the idea he had of basing it on a neighborhood and raising funds to support the neighborhood for inclusionary, for density bonuses, for any kind of thinking, granny units, those are kinds of things, those can be made at the local level. Now, if we don't do this, and I'm glad the press is here, and I think you ought to look at it, the state legislature is sick and tired of our 410 cities and 58 counties and other special districts not taking the responsibility for housing their workforce, for housing the people that of all income. That's what the housing element is about. You can't have a general plan without a housing element, and you have to explain all the incomes in that housing element, all the stock, and then you're responsible for maintaining it. You can't just say, oh, you can't afford to live here, you got to go somewhere else. So what the legislature is going to do is start cracking down by allowing developers to come in and get permits without having to go through the planning commission. Now that would ruin an area like this that is very sensitive to aesthetics. But if we don't get it, and if we don't start aggressively figuring out how we're going to save our communities, how we're going to take them back so that the people who work here live here. And frankly, it's so much simpler than solving that problem than trying to build really expensive freeway systems and transportation systems to get that commuter workforce here. We've seen what's happened in the mornings coming into Monterey and the evenings leaving. So I am no longer a public elected official, but I am passionate about the responsibility for communities to save their communities, to allow the workforce in that community to live in that community. And we have enough innovation and enough great ideas, and the people standing behind me all have great suggestions of how we can do this. Failure is not an option. Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you, Congressman Farr. A proven educational leader with experience bringing people together to achieve a shared vision, that describes P.K. Diffenbach, the Superintendent of Monterey Peninsula Unified School District. P.K. Diffenbach.
Thank you very much, Timothy, for your leadership and for inviting me today. I never would have thought when I started my superintendency 4 years ago that housing would be one of the top 3 focuses of my role. But it really is. Every year we hire between 80 and 100 teachers, which is around 20% of our entire teaching workforce. And some retire and some move on, but many of them would rather stay here. But they cannot afford to raise a family in this community. They cannot afford a rental that doesn't eat up much of their paycheck, and so they move on. And what that means is it's a huge challenge for us to continue to maintain the momentum of improving the lives of our students. And so I'm convinced that in order for us as a district to continue our momentum and take the next step, we need to be an active partner in helping to solve this housing crisis right here on the Monterey Peninsula. And so we're going to invest our time and our resources and our energy to doing our part, to trying to be creative and partnering with innovative funds such as these. I'm convinced that the future of our democracy, and I think if you take a moment and really reflect on what's going on, the future of our democracy is dependent on a thriving public school system. And we will not be able to have a thriving public school system here on the Monterey Peninsula if we don't solve the housing crisis that's in front of us. So this takes precedent for me. It's something that we met before, and I'm sure we'll meet again. But we have, because of the closure of Fort Ord, properties that are underneath Monterey Peninsula that are not used for schools. that we are open to considering alternative options for those if it helps our staff and our community find housing that ultimately helps our students. So thank you very much for including me, and it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next up, we have with us Amy Stalker, who is the Gathering for Women business manager, and she is a Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey board member. Amy has a lot of experience in her background, but also including chief financial officer at the Harbinger Group, where she provided direction for the accounting and finance functions of the organization in overseeing insurance and risk management and compliance with federal and state regulations and planning capital resources. Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey board member Amy Stalker.
Thank you, Timothy. I am so pleased to be participating in the creation of the Neighborhood Housing Fund for Monterey. I think in all of us, we are seeking a sense of home and a place that feels like home. And it is incredibly important that we as a community preserve that, create that, and continue to foster that so that there's an opportunity for people in this community to find that place that feels like home. And I am extremely honored to be a part of that work and very much looking forward.
Thank you, Amy.